MacVoices is sponsored by MintMobile. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/MacVoices. And by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices2019 to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Welcome back to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I've really been looking forward to this conversation simply because it should have happened a long time ago. But now we've got an extra good reason to talk to Jon Gotow of Clair Software. Jon, welcome. It's been way too long since I've had you on the show, and it's completely my fault.
No, it has been. I could have reached out too, but thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
I know you have nothing else to do, Jon.
I'm just sitting around twiddling my thumbs in the background.
Yeah, I kind of figured that. Jon is the author of one of my absolute top 3 pieces of software, and that's Default Folder. If I sit down at a Mac without Default Folder, it's one of those that I just feel like I'm in alien territory, because it runs. I don't think we appreciate the fact that we all use open and save dialog boxes all the time. And that's where Default Folder lives, at least for me, and it just enhances my productivity so much. And you've probably heard about Default Folder. God knows we've talked about it enough on the show with different guests who feel the same way I do. But I wanted to get Jon on to talk a little bit about the transition to Catalina. We're all going to lose a lot of software in the 64-bit transition. And I wanted to find out from a leading developer what it takes to transfer over or rewrite or port this stuff over to 64-bit, and if our expectations are realistic for developers to have this ready on day one. So, Jon, that's where we start. How is Default Folder progressing for Catalina?
Oh, I'm pretty well prepared for Catalina. Over the years, I've already been everything over to 64-bit and making sure that I'm using Apple's most modern API calls to do everything with the operating system. As you go along through the years, Apple will replace different operating system functions with others. For example, launching if an application needs to launch another application, in years past, there was one way to do it, and as they improved security for the system, they actually introduced new system calls, and they'll say, "Okay, developers, you've got 3 or 4 years to convert from this to the new one before we essentially drop support for the old one entirely." And so that's what they've done with 64-bit. I mean, they started telling developers to convert everything to 64-bit years ago. And most developers have been keeping up fairly well. It was actually kind of interesting. I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail later, but I was surprised at the number of applications that actually still have little bits and pieces that are still 32-bit. Even things like Adobe's applications have been 64-bit for a number of years, but there's an uninstaller app that's bundled inside each of their applications that's actually still 32-bit. Because it's one of those utility things that they were just kind of like, yeah, it works. Nobody's, it's not very interesting. It does its job, whatever. And so they just kept going along with it. And then Catalina's coming out now, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, there are pieces that we never finished, updating to 64-bit. And I think that's actually, they have now, the latest version of Creative Cloud has everything 64-bit, but I think I was looking at one of the earlier Creative Cloud releases, and some of Adobe's apps are still had 32-bit pieces in them. And converting your software as a developer, it really depends a lot on exactly what your software does. For example, applications that decoded QuickTime movies are one particularly bad spot, because Apple has QuickTime is a modular architecture, and there are plugins and encoders and decoders that actually take care of essentially making the video happen for QuickTime. And older video formats actually use what they call codecs, encoder decoders, that are only available in 32-bit. And so if you're a developer that does video applications or high-end audio, there are some video and audio formats that there are no 64-bit encoders for them. And they're just going to have to stop supporting, for example, old QuickTime movies. And there isn't really a solution for some of those guys, because the technology has just been obsoleted, and they have to essentially drop that feature in going to Catalina. And so, and in other cases, they have to, as I was saying before, move to a new system programming interface that's 64-bit that will take care of that for them. And sometimes it's a rather complicated transition. Moving from the old audiovisual libraries to the new core audio stuff is they're not just drop-in replacements. You can't just say, if you had code that was saying, give me audio from this file, you can't just use a different function to say, give me audio from this file. All of a sudden you have to look at how many audio tracks it has and what the timescale is and things like that you didn't have to deal with before. So you actually have to rewrite parts of your application to make it 64-bit. So it can be, depending on what you do, fairly complicated. I know, not an easy answer.
Well, no, but it scares me just a little bit, because it sounds like that this could be a relatively minor undertaking or a relatively major undertaking for some of my favorite applications. And I already know there's some out there that have kind of said, yeah, this is the end of the line, and are leaving us not hanging, because that's not really fair to the developer. They've just made a decision that it's not worth their time and effort to put that effort in. And yet some of those utilities are things on that I depend on. I know other people depend on for their workflows. So we've got to go start looking.
Yeah, that's going to be a hard thing, because I'm in the same position. There are there are several applications that I use that have either been discontinued or are just prohibitively expensive to upgrade to 64-bit for the uses I have for them. And that's going to be painful. It's especially bad for things like I was saying, old QuickTime movies, or in my case, I used to use Adobe Fireworks to do graphics. It's sort of a combination of Photoshop and Illustrator, sort of, and it was really convenient. And so I have all of these old Fireworks files with artwork and ads and all kinds of things. That once I upgrade to Catalina, I won't be able to run Fireworks anymore, and I won't be able to open those files at all. And that's something that people really need to think about before upgrading to Catalina, is not only what applications can't you run, but what files do you have that those applications open, and do you have some other alternative, to open those files if you just need to, if some customer comes back and says, I want the invoice from 3 years ago, and your invoicing software didn't make the jump to Catalina, how are you going to give that person their invoice? Because you can't open the old file. So everybody's got to sort of carefully look at what they're doing with their Mac before they upgrade to Catalina, if they want to be absolutely sure that they're safe.
So I'm not sure if you're the guy to ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway, and then you can send me somewhere else if we need to. But is any virtualization software potentially a bit of a fix?
Yeah, you can run. You can get something like VMware and install High Sierra or Mojave in it, and then run that inside the virtual machine to go back, essentially go back in time and run an older version of the operating system. Yeah, you could do that. And I suspect a lot of professional folks, publishing houses and audio engineering places and things like that are going to have to do that for a while.
Well, it's arguably cheaper and easier than just keeping an old Mac sitting and running.
Yeah.
I guess that's a 6 to 1, half dozen the other. It just sort of depends on where you sit and how much you're going to have to rely on it. But the one thing is that you can't you can put off a little bit, but things keep moving forward, and you're going to have to move forward, and you're going to have to find alternatives. And this might be a good opportunity for developers to look around and see what's missing or what's about to go obsolete, and see if they can start developing replacements.
Yeah,
so that's coming from a non-programmer, John. So am I oversimplifying things?
No. I mean, I think you're right on. You're right on target with that, because people do need you can't just stay stuck in Mojave forever. You do have to have some plan forward, and whether it's changing your workflow or finding a new piece of software to use in place of something, everybody needs to do that eventually, and developers will certainly step in where we can to provide solutions. It's interesting because I was talking about Fireworks before, and I thought about, okay, well, how hard is it? Can I just make I'll write a translator to translate all my Fireworks files, because I can't use Fireworks anymore. And as it turns out, the file format for Fireworks files is not documented. and the way they do things is stick their own special tags in ping files. And unless you have the actual Fireworks graphics engine, you can't replicate what it does. So it's from a developer standpoint, it's like you'd have to rewrite half of Fireworks in order to read their files, which isn't going to happen. So there are some unfortunate cases like that where it's not really possible. The other people that are I think are going to get bitten in the short term are people that like audio customers that use Steinberg, for instance, and some of the VST plugins and high-end audio stuff that are mostly musicians and things like that. They don't have the option really of using a virtual machine, because all of the stuff they're interfacing with is, hardware, keyboards, samplers, all kinds of actual things that plug into the machine, and those things they don't work in a virtual machine. And so I think those guys are actually going to have to keep old Macs around, just to be able to deal with it until Steinberg and all the audio plugin manufacturers come up with new versions of their 64-bit versions of their stuff. And those things are hard to do. So I think those developers are going to be slower to come up to speed on Catalina.
MintMobile is sponsoring this edition of MacVoices. When was the last time you considered switching your cell carrier? I'm betting it was the last time you paid your bill. There has to be a better option out there than the same big carriers that have the big retail stores and the big bills to go with them. Now, however, you do have a choice. MintMobile is a new, modern kind of carrier, doing business online so they keep the costs down. But lower costs don't mean inferior service. Mint Mobile has amazing coverage, 4G LTE data plans, and even lets you keep your existing phone if you want to. And Mint Mobile has all the options you want and use. Unlimited nationwide talk and text, and data plans that run from 3 to 12 gigabytes per month. Those big carriers want you to think that the activation process is complex and difficult, so you won't leave them. Mint Mobile shows you just how easy it is. Your SIM arrives at your door, the activation process takes minutes, not hours, and you're up and running like nothing changed. Except that it did. You just moved into the 21st century with Mint Mobile. I want you to get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free by visiting mintmobile.com/MacVoices. That's mintmobile.com/MacVoices. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Mint Mobile for their support of MacVoices.
So, as an end user, how realistic is it, or how should I be viewing my favorite developers if their software is not ready for Catalina at this point? And because Apple, as you said earlier, Apple's been saying that this is coming. I mean, they've been telegraphing this for a long time, and just like a few other changes in the past that we've lived through. And some developers seem to be right on top of it, and others not so much.
So much so.
Yeah, and so should I be angry over that? Should I be upset, or should I just try to be patient and say, yeah, I get it?
Well, it's hard because as Mac users, we really don't know what the economics of things look like for developers. I know that there are some developers that use cross-platform libraries so that they can release their software on both Windows and Mac. And for those guys, making changes can be very difficult because they're dependent on whoever provides their cross-platform frameworks and everything else that goes into building their product. And so then they're dependent on some downstream developers that need to come up to speed before they can fix their software. And so you end up with these timelines. It's kind of like, when you're building a house, you kind of have to wait for the foundation guys to finish all the block work before you can start building the frame on top of it. If there are problems with the foundation, you've got to get those guys to fix it before you can, fix anything on top of it. And so it's really kind of hard to say whether you should be angry at the developer or not. I mean, it would be nice if everybody kept on top of things and had it all ready on day one, but some companies actually hire out software development to someone else, and so they're not necessarily aware of all the issues, or they don't know how long it's going to take. Other people are dependent on other software developers for components to go into their software. So I tend to give other developers a bit of slack on that stuff. Even when I have something that's not working, I try and be understanding about it because I don't know their economic situation or exactly what their code situation is, as far as how their software is put together. So I'd encourage people to have patience. Contact the developer and say, okay, so what's the timeline look like? It's only fair that they should be able to provide you with some sort of estimate on when they'll have something for you. Just as a customer, you need to know that to plan. Can you just put off upgrading to Catalina for a month? Is that all it's going to take? Or are they going to be another year before they've got a 64-bit version out? And then you've really got to, start looking at your options.
Yeah, and I probably should withdraw the word angry because that's probably not appropriate. But
no, it's appropriate.
Is it appropriate? Okay, all right, good. Well, thank you for the affirmation. I appreciate it.
Stuff that, it's inconvenient if somebody, you upgrade. It's kind of like, well, I either can't upgrade or I already upgraded, and now this doesn't work. And yes, I'm mad because they knew, like you said, I mean, Apple's telegraphed this for years. They knew it was coming. It's not like we didn't know better. So yeah, I mean, anger is kind of harsh sometimes, but sometimes it's justified.
Well, I agree. I mean, that's the way I would feel because I know having gone through multiple transitions in the past. Yeah. There were those utilities that you just hated to lose, and you were just super frustrated. And of course, back then you didn't have the internet, so you didn't have the communication channels to be able to contact the developer. Some had really good tech support and customer support, and others had none. And now it's a little bit easier because now a developer I would like to think that you could post something on a blog or on their webpage or on their Facebook page or somewhere that I could go and get that information. And I think that will go a long way toward pacifying people if they know you're working on it.
Right.
It's when you're in the dark that it gets frustrating.
Yeah, I've found whenever customers do have issues, if I explain where I am, what's going on, give them a time frame where I'll have an answer or at least a better explanation for what's going on. People are usually pretty receptive, and it's hardest when you're completely in the dark and the developer just says, I don't know. It's kind of like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah. And John, it also feels like that since the last major transition, we all have become even more dependent on our machines for not just socialization and entertainment, but for actually getting work done.
Yeah.
And that may sound like I'm making that statement like 10 years too late, but it just feels like now. I mean, if the power goes out in most offices, the office is completely down.
Right. Everybody just might as well go home.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been through the transition where there was resistance to computerization simply because, well, what do we do when the power goes out? How are we going to get any work done? And it quickly became evident that, well, you're probably just going to send people home because the advantages of the computers are so much greater than maintaining an old paper file system that, we're going to go with the computers and just deal with the downtime. That said, it really is frustrating when your favorite app suddenly won't run or can't run.
I know. I'm concerned about the transition to Catalina just for everyday users because, Apple's had Mojave and High Sierra putting up warnings about 32-bit code for a while, but I don't really think that your, average Joe user who's not a really savvy computer user, I'm not sure if they really understand, that yes, their software, some applications are just going to really stop working, and you can't just call up a Mac consultant guy and have him come in and fix it. It just doesn't work. And so, I actually put together an app called Go64 that scans your computer and shows you in a quick list which applications you have that are 32-bit, and gives you, like the URL for the developer's website and stuff, so you can go and check and see if there's an upgrade. But I did that partly because I really am just kind of worried that people will get stuck in a bad place, because it's so easy. I mean, Apple makes it so easy to upgrade. It's kind of like, oh, Catalina's out. Just click on the button. It downloads, upgrades everything, right? And I'm sure I know that the installer has a warning in it, and it will actually put up a dialog that says you have these applications you've used recently that won't run in Catalina. And I'm just hoping that everybody pays attention. I mean, we often have a habit of just going through and clicking the OK button. It's like, just get it installed, and I'll worry about the rest of it later. And you can't really. And so, hopefully people will be cognizant of it. They can, like I said, they can go to the Clair Software website and download Go64 for free if they want to actually do a complete scan and check what they've got that's 32-bit. The Apple System Information Utility will also do that. You kind of have to dig through a little bit to find out. Hopefully this goes well.
Well, so folks, this is your wake-up call and your warning call. Go download John's utility and, find out just what is in danger, and then do a little research and find out what is mission critical for you and what the plans are for the developer. Yeah. Because I mean, I'm not one to jump on the first day of the new operating system. I don't run betas because, frankly, I just don't have time to deal with them. But I'm also not going to be the first one to jump off the cliff when the Golden Master comes out either, and especially under these circumstances.
Yeah, I think it pays to be cautious about things, and you know, my only worry, I guess, is that most of the people that are watching you are already fairly computer savvy, and it's all the other people that are really not paying attention at all that I feel are going to get bitten. And so that's really where my worry is. People that are watching MacVoices already are at least somewhat plugged into what's going on.
Today's edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Linode. You can build it on Linode. Here are the facts about Linode. Linode is a virtual cloud server service that lets you build the server you need in the cloud. And not just any server, but a server that suits your specific needs. From a $5 per month Nanode plan, the whole way up to a full-blown, dedicated, custom server with native SSD storage, a 40 gigabit network, and an industry-leading processor. Get up and running in a matter of minutes, not hours or days. Pick a plan, pick a distro, pick a location. That's it. Your server is online. Speaking of location, Linode has 10 worldwide data centers, including the newest in Toronto and one opening soon in Mumbai. So if geography is an issue for you, it isn't an issue with Linode. Linode also comes with a ton of one-click installs for things like WordPress, VPN servers, Minecraft servers, and many more. So getting up and running with a specific type of server is quick and easy. Need multiple servers? Not only can Linode handle that for you, but their easy-to-use dashboard makes management easy. Just as easy as their monitoring and backing up of your server. And of course, service is always an issue. Linode has 24/7 customer support that is always just a phone call away. Now you know the facts about Linode. Okay, maybe not all the facts, but that should get you started. Visit linode.com/MacVoices to round out your knowledge, and while you're there, use the code MacVoices to get $20 credit on your first Linode server. That's $20 credit at linode.com/MacVoices, and a big thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices.
John, we had a little conversation pre-show here about software updates and paying for software updates and all. From what you've said, I think it's very reasonable to expect developers to maybe charge for a lot of these updates and these upgrades, because it's not just a matter of flipping a couple bits and saying, "Oh yeah, now it'll work." It again, depending on the application, there can be a whole lot of work involved.
Yeah, depending on the app, there can be quite a bit of work involved, and that's the thing is, yes, people. I mean, one of the things that we put into Go64, the application that checks for 32-bit apps, is actually a field where you can put in the upgrade cost for any of your 32-bit apps, and it'll add it all up and give you a total. Because I do anticipate that, some developers will and should charge for the work that they have to do. I would hope that they're also including some new features and things like that that make it worthwhile, make it a worthwhile purchase for the users, in addition to just getting compatibility with Catalina. But customers do have to understand that there is a cost just to keeping software working. When Apple makes when we go through these transitions, it is a lot of work, depending on what software you're running, to actually, I've spent, periods of months, at times writing and rewriting things just to make it work on the new OS without adding any new features, which for developers is really frustrating too, because, we're sinking a whole bunch of time and resources into doing this. And it's frustrating that we're not happy about, essentially pedaling like mad to stay in place. we'd much rather be writing new features and giving people, tangible value. You can now do this with my software. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes it's a whole lot of work just to make sure everything works well on, with whatever changes Apple's done.
I might disagree with you a little bit there, because if the app is a mission critical app for me, I might just be happy to be able to pay to get it to keep running. I don't know that I need new features if it's doing what I need. But again, it depends on the piece of software and probably, frankly, the user as well. It
does. And I think I guess I look at things from the most curmudgeonly user I have.
Wow.
I don't like to, I don't like to, make people mad at me. And I do understand that people want to see something for their dollars. And it is hard to say, look, here's the new version of the software. It looks exactly the same and it does exactly the same thing. And I want you to pay me for it. For a lot, for people that have it, it's a mission critical part of their system, of their workflow. They're more than willing to pay just to make sure that it keeps going. And they usually understand that they want to pay for it to keep the developer in business. If a developer has a very complicated product that really gets upended by changes that Apple makes in an operating system release, and they have to spend 6 months rewriting a good portion of their application, that's money out of their pockets, and it's got to come from somewhere. And so, users who really understand the business, I've found are more than willing. I mean, I've had people offer to pay me before I charged for an upgrade, because they're just kind of like, I haven't paid you in like 3 or 4 years. I need to pay you again. And it's really nice to have people that understand that. But there are also a lot of people that, their computer is not their main focus, and really think about the software business. And from their perspective, paying for something just to continue having it is not something they're happy about. And I like to try and keep those people happy if I can. But as you say, there's a point at which, you need to charge, because you are putting in a lot of man hours just to make sure that stuff works.
So how do you define now? I was going to ask you how you define your most curmudgeonly user, but it probably isn't a good idea to do that.
No.
So
they might be listening. No.
He might recognize himself. Is that what you're saying? Hey, before we go, I want to make sure a default folder is obviously the flagship for you, but you also have other products. And I wanted to give you a chance just to kind of run through those and what they are, what they do, and if they'll be ready for Catalina.
Everything is ready for Catalina. I do have one bug report for Jettison. So backing up, Jettison is a small application that just runs in the background and ejects external hard drives when you put your computer to sleep. It's very useful if you have a portable Mac. You close the lid, and you may have noticed if you then unplug a drive and walk away, the next time you open it, the operating system gives you this friendly little notice that you disconnected your hard drive improperly, and you may lose data. So Jettison prevents that, and it's a small little app, $4.95 I think, charge for it, that just sort of makes the coming and going a little more easy. App Tamer is ready for Catalina. It essentially slows down or stops applications that are running in the background. So if you're, for example, answering your email and your web browser is sitting in another window running, a lot of times a website will have an animation, or it'll be periodically updating something. and your web browser will actually be using, 50% of one CPU core just sitting there in the background, doing nothing for you. And so AppTamer gives you the option to slow it down and say, I want this to use a maximum of 5% of one CPU when it's just sitting there in the background. So make it do nothing, even if it's not. And as I said, that's ready for Catalina. And that runs $14.95 for a new license. What else have I got? Go64 we talked about. That's free, just as a service to get people to not have a terrible experience with Catalina. And History Hound is a search utility that essentially sits on your computer and watches your web browsing, and keeps track of all of the pages that you visited and lets you search for those pages based on any text that appeared in the page. So it's sort of like your own private Google, where all of your search history is still staying on your machine, and so it does everything just local. It doesn't do any cloud stuff. It's not sharing your data with anybody or anything like that. And it also understands multiple browsers. So if you're in the habit of using Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, depending on, a website that only works in one or two of them or something like that, it'll actually aggregate all of your browser history together, so that when you do a search, it'll come up no matter which browser you happen to be using at the time, which a bunch of people that do research for various things seem to have a propensity to use multiple browsers. And so I've got a lot of people that use it for that feature. And that's about where we sit right now.
Okay, so I think this is a call to arms, folks. First of all, get out there and download Jon's app and find out what your issues are and where you need to be, what you need to be looking for to maybe replace, or looking to your developers to find out. Developers, please keep us informed, because we really do want to continue to do business with you. But some of us really need to know some of this stuff. It's going to be an interesting time, and and if you have an idea for an app that is not going to be updated and needs to be replaced, maybe you want to call Jon and give him an idea.
Yeah, I've had a few of those. There's some interesting. Well, people bring it up. There's some interesting little apps just that take care of little pain points for people that are not being updated. And yeah, contact your favorite developer and see if they've got time to put something together, and whether it makes business sense to do so. Yeah, there are some things that are not going to work anymore. And it's the price of progress. This is something Apple needs to do, and I can't really fault them for it at this point. We've known it's been coming for, like you said, Chuck, a long time.
Yeah. And please, folks, one last thing. Remember what Jon said about the effort it's taking to bring these apps up to 64-bit. And, the developers do have to get paid so they will stay in business and keep developing these great apps. So when you see an upgrade price come along for something that promises compatibility with Catalina, take a deep breath and recognize that it did take some work to get there, and then support the developer if you think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
We definitely appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate everything you do, Jon, especially with me personally, but especially with Default Folder. All the others are great, but Default Folder is one that I really don't want to live without. So take care of yourself, please. Exercise and eat healthy, will you?
Will do. I'll try.
The website where folks can go to learn see all of this stuff and find out more is
stclairsoft.com, stclairsoft.com, or you can just go to defaultfolder.com. That actually directs to us too.
Great. Jon, it's good to see you. We have to do this more often, but I really appreciate you taking the time to walk through this with us.
I appreciate you having me on, Chuck. It's been great.
We'll do it again.
Okay.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Catalina is coming. Please be prepared. We'll have more shows like this to educate you a little bit, to remind you to pay attention, and to get you ready. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching.
Visit macvoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/macvoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.